As indicated in the screen, we shall be continuing this topic about poverty, and we'll be talking about the government of the free market system. Of course, it's very providential that tomorrow would be the State of the Nation address of our president. And of course, this would be very much related to our topic today. And of course, just like what I've told you, this is taken from the book by theologian Wayne Grudem and the economist Barry Asmuth. And of course, you've seen this picture several times, and you can see its many appearances in other parts of the country, its manifestation in so many other forms, but definitely it speaks about poverty. Let me just show to you a NEDA report. Di po yung commercial na yan. Pero kasi alam nyo naman po pag nangunguha tayo sa internet, kailangan yung commercial. Ano po. So, but NEDA was saying, the National Economic Development Authority, that Philippines can still achieve the upper middle income status by 2025. And that's, of course, a few months from now. And, of course, many are hopeful that we would indeed be achieving this particular economic status. The income threshold there for that particular economic status is $4,500 per annum. And of course, that would be a big jump. But that's the promise. But let's see what the government could do. Just a quick review of the previous lesson. We're talking about the solution on a national focus. So we're not talking about yung mga, those poor people, individually helping them. And of course, you will see it's not really a simple solution. In fact, when we discuss the kind of government that we should have, there will be 17 important attributes. And then, of course, we have already looked at the Bible is very replete with examples that we should be helping the poor. And then, of course, we are not trying to promote wealth gospel, and material prosperity is just a secondary issue. The main issue that we would want to consider, of course, is our relationship with God. And as we have seen, the correct goal, what we need to have really is to increase production of goods and services. And we have reviewed already, described the wrong systems. And last time that I was standing in front of you, we have looked at the moral advantages of the free market. And so this morning, we shall be looking at the government. Of course, why the government? After we have looked at the right goal, the wrong systems, there's the importance of looking what kind of government the free market system should have. Looking firstly at Romans 13:4, we see here the Apostle Paul describing the role of civil authorities, specifically that they are God's servant for your good. And civil authorities being the servant, kaya nga we see sometimes government officials, they would put in front of their offices public servant. And I'm really not sure if they're really public servant because kung makaasta, akala nyo boss talaga sila. Ano? Pag lumapit ka, nakikiusap ka, lalo't kukuha ka ng lisensya, permit, etc. But anyway, but the point is for the good. And the government should indeed work for the benefit of the people, not personal gain or their friends. And of course, this is something that we often hear, particularly now that election is just around the corner. We see already campaign materials, despite the fact that they're saying they're not campaigning, they're just greeting. They would greet you, class of 2024, congratulations, and they have their big names. And they're working for the benefit of the society, not their personal gain, accordingly. But this is what the government should really be 4. And for this morning, I'll try to cover 17 points about the government. I'll just probably skim through. But I think you could easily follow through without me really describing very lengthily. There would be 17 attributes. I won't read them one by one now, but that's the first 4, then 7, 12, and then 17, and we shall be looking at them one by one. The first one, every person in the nation is equally accountable to the laws, including wealthy and powerful people. This is a very fundamental attribute of the government, that everybody is accountable to the law. No one is above the law. And of course, we may, of course, start questioning, is that true in the Philippines, that no one is above the law and that the law is implemented equally, irrespective of your status, irrespective of your connection, irrespective of your power, or even your wealth, because you could probably pay the judge. But one more thing that we have to add about this is that the law has to have a moral authority, meaning to say that it should dictate the rightness and wrongness. In fact, if we could look at the Bible, a very prominent example would be that of David. He was king then, and of course he committed adultery with Bathsheba, and eventually, to cover up his tracks, he planned out, and essentially he did it, the murder of Bathsheba's wife, Uriah, a very faithful and valiant soldier at that of King David. But of course, that God wouldn't allow that. And of course, we know that in 2 Samuel 11 to 12, the prophet Nathan confronted him. And you know that very famous, "You are the man." And of course, you know what Nathan, the parable that he described first, and of course, alluding to David. And we know that David was definitely punished for that. He lost his son. And then throughout the remaining times that he was king, he had a coup d'etat sponsored by one of his sons, Absalom, and then the death of his son. And it was just a very tumultuous, turbulent life that he had. And that's part of the punishment. And just like what we heard earlier, Deacon June was talking about the punishment for Israel, for disobeying, for rebelling against God. And in here, we are emphasizing that no one is above the law, not even the king. And that should be one of the attributes of the government of a good free market system. Second, the nation's courts, the courts. So we talk about the implementation of the law. Now, there are courts which, of course, make judgment on cases. They should show no favoritism, no bias, no partiality, and they should enforce justice impartially. Just like what we're talking about. And of course, we see always that iconic lady with a blindfold holding a scale, timbangan. No? So everybody is equal, and justice will be blind to the status of the people, but they would look at the evidence. And therefore, it's very important that the nation's courts would have this kind of characteristic, and they should be impartial both to the rich and to the poor. Because sometimes they would just favor one sector. Sabihin, kawawa naman ito. Tulungan natin. Let's help them. But of course, it doesn't mean that they have the license to do wrong. So there should be really impartiality. And this is an important characteristic of the government that the nation should have. No favoritism, no bias, enforce justice impartially. And of course, this very this next one, next characteristic, bribery and corruption are rare in government offices. Rare. We know the meaning of rare, bihira, and if possible, it should be non-existent. And if they are found out, they should be quickly punished. That should be a good characteristic of the government of a free market. And of course, naputol, ano? Naputol pala nung kinapi ko. No? Alam nyo naman yung first line ni former President Noynoy Aquino. Ano yung nawala? Ayon, kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap. No corruption, no poor people. And that was his slogan when he ran as president. And I don't know if he achieved that goal. And if we are already rid of corruption, your guess is as good as mine. Of course, the Bible is very replete with these admonitions, commandments that you shall not take any bribe, for bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. And of course, there are other Bible verses here. And what it's just saying is that if you are in a government position, if you are in government power, you should not use it for personal gain, private gain. In fact, there's even that civil service law that government officials are not supposed to receive even gifts. Bawal tumanggap ng regalo. Kaya kahit si Brother Rex pupunta sa Malacanang daw on Thursday, wala siyang sasakyan. Pero hindi naman po siya sasakay daw sa bus. Ewan ko kung paano. Sino magre-regalo sa kanya. Pero somebody asking favor from him, from the National Innovation Council. May meeting kasi daw siya doon. But, of course, that's just a simple example. But other, no? Alam naman ninyo, no? In many government offices, there would be some people carrying buko pie from Los Baños because they want some favor from some offices. I do remember attending one necrological service, and one of the speakers there were saying, this guy was carrying buko pie just in one of the offices. I don't know if just a favor or something, but bawal daw to. This is not supposed to be. And therefore, this is something that good government of free market system should have. Rare, if at all possible, non-existent. But of course, in this fallen and sinful world, we know that we cannot totally eliminate bribery and corruption. And that's quite sad. You may have your own personal experience. We can relate it even during the open forum, but let's hope that our government would indeed be eliminating this. Just to show you the levels of corruption, this is the data that I got from the internet. And accordingly, the Philippines' level of corruption, this one, is 24.3 against a global average of 48.3. So, Philippine data is highlighted in the table below. So, you can see there, may score, ano? World Economic Corruption, ang grade daw natin ay D. Delta. Ano kaya ibig sabihin ng D? Kasi merong A. Denmark is A. And of course, you can see the other Scandinavian countries, advanced countries, Finland, New Zealand, Norway, Singapore, and of course, in Asia, and so on, even Sweden, Switzerland. All Asia, ano? Ang haba, mahaba naman yung A, ano? But of course, meron ng B, tapos C, tapos nandun po tayo sa D. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng D? May E pa naman, hindi naman tayo nasa E. Kasi yung pong E ay extremely poor quality, yung daw pong D ay poor. Tayo sa corruption index. So, medyo malungkot po yun. This is one source. I got, I think, another source corruption perception level, Transparency International, our score is 34 out of 100, and we ranked 115 out of 180 countries in terms of corruption perception. And of course, it's quite sad that we are in this particular mire of problem, corruption. So let's move on. Another characteristic of the nation's government is that it ought to have adequate power to maintain governmental stability and prevent crime. So it ought to have enough power. It ought to have enough authority so that it can effectively implement the laws and particularly prevent the crime. And sadly, and of course we heard this, I think, from the series of Deacon June when he was expositing on Judges, the history of Israel, where there was no effective government because during that time, there was no king in Israel. And what did they do? Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And that was historical Israel, and we can just think of our own self. And let me again present to you the crime rate in the Philippines based on a particular website, Statista. Looks quite reliable. But these are the number of crime incidents in the Philippines. From 2020 to 2022 per thousand of population. So it's 394, 375, 379. So not really that bad, but of course we're still hounded by so much problems. Well, I won't describe to you all these statistics, but we can see it, the number of crimes against person, 2022, by committed against person in the Philippines, 2022 by type. Ayaw nang pakita, no? Anyway, but we see that it's still a little bit high, and I'll show you some other statistics. But the point here is adequate power. Because if the government is unable to implement its authority, it will not be able to provide the goods for the benefit of the society. So there should be this sufficient power. This is an example in other countries. You might be familiar. This one are the Houthi rebels menacing the Red Sea. We know that even there were some Filipino sailors in one of the incidents who was killed. And this one is in Haiti, where you probably, if you're following the news, they're really literally goons in their capital city, patrolling the street instead of policemen keeping order. And these are examples of countries where disorder, chaos rules. And let's pray to God that it doesn't happen in the Philippines. And therefore, we want that our government should have this power to maintain government stability to prevent crimes. On the other hand, the government, despite the fact that having enough power, should likewise have limits to power. Because the government, which is so powerful, could also curtail personal freedoms. And the government who could step out of bounds, they could step out of bounds and just be really infringing on so-called personal freedoms and, like, for example, property rights. Brother Raymond was talking about the United States earlier with that hymn that we sang. Of course, it doesn't mean that we want to follow the U.S. example, but we know that the history of the U.S. has been really founded by the Puritans. And one of the things that they really promoted is really this personal freedom. They have freedom of speech, they have freedom of religion, but of course, this now is being questioned in so many forums in the U.S. You may cause harm, that's the term that they use, if you use the wrong pronouns to address maybe students in the university. It's good that I'll just be serving the university for a few months, and I don't know if I'll reach that stage that, or I hope the UPLB or UP in general will not reach that stage where you have to use the correct pronouns to address your students. Otherwise, I could be in trouble because I used to address my students by their first name, not their preferred names, because of their gender identity. And I talked with I think the head of the God Center in UPLB, and he said, "You could be in trouble, sir, if you use the wrong pronouns." I said, "Is that so? So I better retire." But that's just one of it, and you can just think of other personal freedoms, because in fact in the Constitution of the United States there are so-called inalienable rights given to us by God, rights to life, and even the pursuit of happiness, those kind of things. So freedom of religion is guaranteed there, freedom of speech. But of course now it's being questioned, and you could even see now how the Republicans and the Democrats are really trying to woo the American voters because they're saying, "Oh, we'll protect your freedom, this kind of freedom," and so on and so forth. But what we're talking here really are the freedom which really are endowed to us by God. Just take, for example, that right to life. That's a basic freedom. But now it's assaulted in the United States because they have so-called they call it reproductive rights. And that's a euphemism simply for the murder of the unborn in a woman's womb. And of course, they call it a right. The right to expel something, a mass of protoplasm in their bodies. That's how they label their rights. And they want the government to come in, but of course, that's murder. And we know also that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if we allow the government just exercising dictatorial powers, then they could corrupt absolutely. Let's move on. Still related to that limitation of power, the powers of the government are clearly separated between national, regional, local levels, and between different branches of each level. So there are these systems of checks and balances. We know that, for example, in the Philippines, which of course we pattern from the US, we have the executive, which is the one that implements the laws which are being framed, crafted by the legislative branch, the Senate and the Congress. And of course, the judicial, which are the one that interprets if the laws are implemented properly. So that, in effect, is a system of checks and balances. And of course, we have different levels. We have the national government, we have provincial or regional governments and local levels down to the barangay, each having their own authorities. And it has to be really clearly defined. Of course, in the United States, they have this federalism wherein, say, federal agents could not just simply go into a state, into a county, and arrest somebody, except, of course, if they committed a so-called federal crime. Because if the crime is against the state or the county, It's the state or the county police who should be doing it. So that's a separation, clear separation of powers and authority of the various branches of the government. And that should be clear. In fact, even the Old Testament have narratives about the examples of kings who have remained unchecked with their power, and they messed up. We know Saul as a bad example of that. Even David, just like what we have mentioned a while ago. And even Solomon, we know it's very clear in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy, that it says the king should not acquire much gold and horses. And what do we read in the account of the life of Solomon? He has so much gold being received almost left and right. And of course, it corrupted him. And we know the sad account of Solomon in the latter years of his life, that even having concubines, 700 concubines. And of course, it made him be led astray in his walk with God. And of course, there are other examples in the Old Testament about kings in the divided monarchy of Israel. And that, in fact, was the rebellion that have occurred. And that was the message that we heard a while ago from Deacon June, that the Israelites were banished into exile to Babylon. And the separation of powers are clear in the Old Testament. There are the offices of the prophet, which is not the same as the priest, the heads of tribes, and there are heads of clans and families in Israel. And even in the New Testament, there are 12 apostles. Why not only one apostle? Even Peter being probably, he seems to be the head. He's not, of course, the pope. But there are other apostles with him that led the early church. There is the so-called Jerusalem Council, Acts 15:22. And in fact, in the church, there should be, in the church government, a plurality of elders. Accordingly, the church should not be headed only by one elder, but a plurality of elders as seen in Titus 1:5 and James 5:14. And that's why we keep praying for an additional elder, because that ought to be the church government. So, separation of powers. The government is accountable to the people through regular, fair, open elections. That's the one that we are saying we'll be having elections, and let's hope it's really regular, fair, and open. And through freedom of the press and free access to information about the government activities. So this is something that a democratic government should have. And we, of course, have this. And because this is one of the most powerful ways by which the people would ensure accountability. And let's hope really that our co-Filipinos would really be voting wisely, so that these government officials will be really held accountable during elections. Of course, we see here other examples in the scriptures indicating that the government works best with the consent of those who are governed. This is the idea of democracy, that the governed, the people, gives authority to the government so that they would be governed. And that's basically the idea in democracy. And of course, democracy is never perfect. In fact, I have to hastily add that even the free market is not totally free from corruption. And examples of oppressive leaders: Pharaoh, the Philistines, Nebuchadnezzar, and other foreign kings. Next, again, emphasizing on crimes. The government should adequately protect citizens against crime, because unstopped criminal activity would discourage any investments, either by domestic or foreign investors. And we see in 1 Peter that the government is supposed to punish those who do evil. And that's the role of the government. They should not allow these criminals just to be having their heyday, just moving around. It just really surprises me if you have been watching the TV in the United States. There would be this group of criminals just going in through jewelry stores, carrying those big sledgehammers and just ransacking the stores. And that's how the United States has become also chaotic and disorderly in some sense. And of course, we know that the government, just like what the Apostle Paul was saying, is the servant of God against wrongdoer. And this ought to be the role of the government. And in fact, you may probably have seen this, why Manila is ended up as the 5th riskiest city for tourists out of 60 international cities. There is a ranking. This one is really messing up. We're in the league of Caracas, Karachi, Yangon, and Vegas. Brother, the Gregorios were in Nigeria before. Philippines is the 5th, and these are the parameters. There are actually 7. Ayaw i-display kasi hindi daw ako nagsusubscribe. But the rating of Manila is that for foreign tourists. Foreign tourists yan, in terms of crime risk, no? So we see here the number, and I've shown you earlier the rate there. Okay, the government should also adequately protect citizens against epidemics of disease. Talking about coronavirus, but of course there are other epidemics, and we know that this has plagued the world in many occasions in history. And these are, of course, major tragedies, particularly in poor countries. Poor countries are really heavily hit whenever there would be there are epidemics. HIV, AIDS, cholera, sorry for the numbers, malaria, dengue fever, meningitis, and others. Just looking at the COVID-19 deaths, this is the total cumulative. It's 7 million. Of course, we have our own history in the Philippines of how we dealt with the coronavirus. There has been some wrong approaches, and in fact, they're looking at those wrong things that they have done before. But take note of this. Disease epidemics are usually more of results, not the cause of poverty. In other words, those wealthy countries are able to invest more in better health systems. They have cleaner water, cleaner air, better sewage system, better disposal of waste, a better environment. And that's why they have lesser. Doesn't mean they're completely free from epidemics. Coronavirus, COVID-19 is a clear testament to the inability even of wealthy countries to totally control it. But the government should exert all these efforts, because a sickly country could not be a productive country. The nation's legal system adequately protects people and businesses against violation of contracts. Of course, we know legal contracts, they should not be violated, because businesses rely on the enforcement of contracts in order to survive. So think of a car company relying on a tire company for the tire supply contract. If you order a car and your salesman, Brother Rex, malapit na daw bumili kung bibili niya, walang gulong, because the tire company did not provide or did not honor the contract, there's a problem. So the government must enforce the performance of such contracts, or unscrupulous people will order things and not pay for them. You probably have this kind of problem. You ordered something from Shopee or Lazada, although there's no contract, but there is in some way a unwritten contract whenever you make these purchases. But if you get something not good, well, of course, there's so-called customers' rights protection that would allow you to return them. But some people are abusing this. And that's very important. And the biblical support here is the commandment, you shall not steal, and you shall not bear false witness, against your neighbor. We should not steal. We should not get something which is not our property. And that's the same case of not honoring contracts. The nation's legal system adequately protects people and businesses against violation of patents and copyrights. There's just so much violation of this, not only in the Philippines. Whenever we see patents and copyrights being violated, because these are intellectual property rights. Because a nation can stifle innovation and invention through price controls that prevent inventors from gaining significant profits from their inventions. Look at this. Oops. Oops. I'm not going to show you that video. But there's that real and fake. Meron naman nag-alok sa inyo, Sir, gusto niyo Rolex? Magkano? 1,000 lang ho. But we know Rolex is almost 1 million pesos. Okay? And it's not only the watches. You can have a Louis Vuitton bags and all those sort of fake things. And that's a violation of these patents and copyrights, which of course stifles, or rather violates the intellectual property rights of the inventors. The government effectively protects the nation against foreign invasion. If a nation is invaded and conquered by a foreign power, its wealth is plundered and its economic growth stymied or prevented, reduced. So the Old Testament shows examples of God punishing Israel through foreign conquest. That was what Deacon June was earlier talking to us, and in his earlier message about the Midianites ravishing the produce, the farms of the Israelites in Judges 6. And of course, we see also God's blessing of deliverance and peace when the Israelites were obeying him. David's victories against so many wars that he had, first and foremost of which is his victory over Goliath. And even in Solomon's reign, when he had a very prosperous and peaceful nation. We see here one of the ravages of World War II. And that really is an awful blot spot in our history whenever there are wars. And government should effectively protect nations against invasion. On the other hand, the government should also avoid useless wars of conquest against other nations. War is the most wasteful of uses. It destroys rather than builds. It knows no reason or constraints. That's what we see in Ukraine being invaded by Russia. There's ruthless irrationality, and there's just simply a big cost or toll, not only in terms of lives, but even in property. But just to mention also from our reference, where it says the mechanics of tyranny makes non-democracies inherently belligerent. Take North Korea and Russia. They always think that they have their enemies, the West. And why do they do that? In order to avoid collapsing from within, fierce society must maintain in a perpetual state of conflict. We have this enemy. The West is threatening us. NATO is threatening the Russia, and that's why it has started to invade Ukraine. And we see Finland, which used to be a neutral country, now has joined NATO, including, I think, Sweden. So this kind of mentality by these authoritarian dictators, they maintain this kind of mindset that we have to be always in war. But we know that it costs Russia to have all these economic sanctions, although it's not really paralyzing them, because other countries are still having what do you call that, best friend forever, China and Russia. Likewise, the nation's laws should protect the country against destruction of its environment. That's why we even have our KSN as one of our primary ministries. Because an economically productive nation, and this has been emphasized to us by our environmentalist emeritus, Brother Rex, that economically productive nation must protect natural resources from careless human destruction. If we destroy our environments, we can never achieve good productivity economically. If there would be water and air pollution, which of course would cause much health problems, forest destruction, soil erosion, and the like, overgrazing, even disasters, even the effect of climate change, we would just not be able to move from poverty to progress. And we know that in Genesis 1:28, man was given that commandment to subdue the earth and make it flourish. We are stewards. We are not lord over these resources. So we should, as reliable stewards, maintain our environment. Likewise, the nation requires universal education of children up to a level where people are able to earn a living and contribute positively. So economically productive nations require universal education of all the children in the society. So this is very, very basic, because an illiterate nation will not be able to move out of poverty. In the Philippines, accordingly, the literacy rate reached 99.27 in 2021. However, at least 90% of the Filipino children aged 10 struggle to read or understand simple text, according to the World Bank 2022 data on learning poverty. But even before COVID-19 pandemic set back students' learning, the pre-pandemic figure pegged learning poverty in the Philippines at 70%. So it's really a problem. And we know in other countries, say just like Afghanistan, is the picture I'm showing here, that the Talibans do not like females to be in schools, just the males. But this is very fundamental for the government. Likewise, the nation's laws protect and give some economic incentives to stable family structures. Why are family structures important? There are studies that children who live with two married parents, a father and a mother, not a father and a father, or a mother and a mother, as I will be describing in a short while, have significantly higher educational achievement and are more likely to enjoy a better standard of living in their adult lives. This is a study in the US, and I think we could also see this in our society, that the more that the stable family provides that atmosphere, that environment where the youth, who would be the future workforce, are able to contribute productively and efficiently towards lifting the country out of poverty. There's that issue of same-sex marriage, particularly in the US, where they have the so-called mother and mother and father and father. How could they have children? Well, they are petitioning even the courts that they be allowed in vitro fertilization or surrogate mothers. But that would not last, and we just know that having this kind of family structure would definitely weaken the moral fabric of the society, and even the productivity of eventual workers would be affected. And of course, the nation laws should protect freedom of religion for all religious groups and give some benefits to religion generally. Why? Because societies have concluded that religions, particularly the Christian religion, generally teach good moral values to citizens. Isn't it? Our children are being taught good moral responsibilities, not only in this church, but in other Christian churches. And this brings good to the societies, including economic benefits. If we have morally upright citizens, we expect them to be following contracts, not to be corrupt, and really performing their duties and really contributing to the society as a whole. Even with regards to that literacy issue, the Protestant groups are the one that promoted reading, because Protestants' family are saying that children need to read the Bible. Accordingly, the Catholics are just having their catechism. They are catechized. They're just listening, but they are not being taught to read. So more children of the Protestant families in history have been more educated, and that's one of the values of religion. Of course, you would be happy that I just use GBC. I was looking for some other picture, and I thought, why not use GBC? Because GBC. And to conclude, I ran through 17 points, and I could show that again to you in a while. The main point of this chapter that we were looking is establishing a free market system is simply not enough. It's not just having this free market system, because we talk about the wrong systems. But to bring out a nation from poverty to greater prosperity, it should have a government that protects against corruption, that should protect its citizens against forces, particularly external forces from war, and even disasters, environmental degradation as well, and from people who would harm them, crimes, and promote universal education, stable family structure, and freedom of religion. And now we go to our comments. You can have your comments about the government, but don't ask me if we'll have a change in government. Tomorrow we'll see both pictures of those pro-government and those who would burn the effigies. Accordingly, there are these plans to burn effigies of maybe the president and maybe the flag of Philippines and the United States. And I don't know if they'll burn the flag of China, whatever. But your comments are welcome, and if I could answer your questions, I will. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Hi everyone. Thank you for the lesson. I think we all somewhat all agree that these are good to have, but not necessarily it's happening right now in the Philippines. So I guess my question is, what's your call to action for us? Like, what's the so what? Like, this is good, but this is not happening perfectly. What's the call to action for us as a church member here? Thank you.
Okay, first and foremost, we should be part of this church. Because this church teaches us so much about being Christians. And I think it would also make us very good citizens, morally upright. But at the same time, we know in some ways we are being taught on how to vote properly, correctly. And I think this is one of the messages that we should be really be doing. Though of course, we are not on to political action. This church has never espoused, as a church, political action. But of course, we always hear Pastor Noel saying that he has joined EDSA 1. I don't know, tama ka ba doon, Brother Glenn? Nagyaya si Pastor sa EDSA 1. I don't know. Sino sumama? Sumama sila Sister Jean, no? So, pero hindi madre doon si Sister Jean. But that's an individual action as a Christian during that time. But of course, for our election, I think we need to really educate much of our electorate, because we know that we are electing officials who are not supposed to be there. we keep putting congressmen and senators who are not really doing proper laws or correct laws. I did remember hearing, and I don't know if I was mistaken with that, that the top laws that the Philippine Senate and Congress are producing are those which changes names of streets and barangays. That's the kind of laws that our lawmakers are majoring. Of course, they do a lot of investigations, as we see right now, but we know that many of these investigations, despite the fact that there has been the obvious violation of corruption, there are bribery problems, corruption problems. Very rare they are sent to court. I did remember just recently in the U.S. there is this Senator Menendez. He was just found guilty in a federal court for espionage because in his house was found bars of gold. He was given a Mercedes and a huge amount of money, cash, in his personal jacket. And I don't know if in the Philippines we'll be able to have that kind of level of justice where congressmen and senators, I'm not saying that all of them are corrupt, but we know that there are those kind of things. But of course, I still could not answer your question. It's a very difficult question. Maybe others could share their thoughts, but those are just the kind of thoughts that I could think. And of course, just like what Brother June was saying, we ought to pray really so much for the sins that our nations have been committing. Prayer would be very important, and that's what we do. We always see in our prayer meeting, prayer for our nation and even prayer for for international concerns. Maybe other comments to answer Ninoy's query. What can we do as Christians, as members of Grace Baptist Church of Los Baños, to have a government that would have these kind of attributes? Of course, even those top countries are not completely rid of corruption, bribery, or even they don't have. In fact, even their family structures are being assaulted now by so much of these progressive, liberal worldviews. So we see really practically almost a breakdown in practically globally, but not all. And the government are still able to provide this good for some of these countries. So we see them prospering. Maybe some other brethren would like to add to that, or is that an addition to that, or a question? Okay. Yes, Sister Jean. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a good question, I suppose, yung call to action. But what do we conceptualize action? Sinabi na ni Deacon Ike, it's prayer, is an action. Isip ko lang yung case namin when my mom's, our family's property, merong interested. And ginamit, may ang sinasabi ng brother, kinuha nila yung property, land ng parents ko. And because we are not there, we were not interested. So si mami lang yung natira doon, and she was fighting for principle. So parang yung question, what is that action in the face of injustice? So kumuha siya ng lawyer, and hanggang nakarating, sabi ng brother ko, wag mo na yan, pabayaan mo na, just let that property go. Pero si mami talaga is very, has this resolve to really fight for principle. Hanggang nakarating kami sa Supreme Court. We lost the case. And so we were thinking we all have the documents, lahat ay fake documents yung the other side. Bakit pa rin sila? Because our lawyer, I think, sold the case to them. Maybe he won, he got more money. That's how we look at it.
Bribery.
Bribery. Pero So what do you do? What is your action in that face of injustice?
Injustice.
So si Mommy, I was telling her, Ma, the land is not ours, it's the Lord's. And I think yun yung action niya is to submit to whatever happened and believe that justice will come,
Eventually.
in the second coming and all. So you have this peace na, there's an injustice. Rather than fight it out, when it's a Supreme Court decision, may estudyante ako doon, and I asked my student, could you check on the result? Kasi we were not even informed by the lawyer. And talagang, ako, honestly, galit na galit ako doon sa lawyer. No? Just made money. Pero naisip ko rin, ba't ba hindi namin si Mami tinulungan? We're very independent-minded people, and si Mami, bahala si Mami, ako bahala. So we thought, but ako, naisip ko na, what's the peace now that's needed? What's the justice? Is God's justice? That is also a call to action, because you can, pwedeng, hindi naman yung mahasten yung death ng isang tao, but no, it's the peace that God gives to us as Christians, na hindi kailangang parang lagi punta ka sa streets, or ipapa-Facebook mo, or ipapatulfo mo, or whatever na you are, but you leave the action to God. But it's also an action when you submit to what God allows. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sister Jean. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, of course, we can say in the United States they have the right to bear arms, one of their fundamental rights. But we don't want any road rage that if you had traffic problems, you'll take out your gun, shoot anybody. Other comments? Anything else to share? No? Of course, what Sister Jean have shared about the peace that we have fight injustice. Yes, Deacon Glenn.
Thank you. It's really complicated ang situation natin. But I always say it starts with the family. Maraming mahirap sa taas, dami tayong komento sa taas, mas maraming streets ang na-approve kasi walang debate sa streets eh. Kaya kahit ako congressman, mandaling i-approve agad yan. Kaya kung i-count mo yun, marami talaga. Those pertinent law, talagang debate yan, taon yan. Kaya maraming huwag tayong maging negative sa ating mga. Second thing is you start with the family. I think as a Christian, start with your family. Values, honesty, with the next generation. If you point to the government, wala na, late ka na. You start for our next generation. Like involvement, kagaya ni Jean. Sorry Jean, gamitin lang yung example na ganun. But if we, children, involved tayo doon, simula pa, hindi lang ang nanay natin, baka may pag-asa. Kasi nag-involve tayo, nandun tayo, suporta tayo sa agwan. Kita nilang involved. Baka yung kalaban, buong pamilya ng sumakop ng lupa mo doon sa law kasi pag hindi mo nabakuran yung pag may nakaupo na doon ibig sabihin hindi ka interested sa party mo. So may mga ganun. So we start from ourselves. Hindi lang alamin ano ang law, alamin kung ano ang ginagawa sa taas. Pag pumunta ka sa Senado, I seated there several times. Talagang grabe ang pinag-uusapan. Grabe ang kwan. Hindi ka matutulala ka they are more bright than us. So we have to know. But pag street kasi, pag sinabing street, wala na magtitanong dyan. Kaya pasa ng pasa yan. Kaya maraming streets na hindi na nga binabasa sa law yan. Na-approve na lang yan kasi walang hearing doon. So may only kwan dito. I will start from our children. We start from ourselves. Anong kontrolado natin? Kasi ang politics mahirap kasi like kung sinasabi noon gusto nating galit na galit tayo sa magnanakaw, galit tayo sa droga. Nung meron tayong presidenteng radical lang ginawa, ayaw naman natin. Parang I just watched last night sa flight ko papunta dito yung General Luna. Kaya nakita kong naramdaman ko yung reality doon na the system, ang pinakamahirap na kalaban ay ang ating sarili. Sila pinatay siya kalaban lang Amerika kaya tuwang-tuwang Amerika. So look at our history, we have the tendency to fight among ourselves, hindi yung kalaban natin. Maraming salamat. So very complicated, but start with our family, baka next generation maganda na. Thank you.
Okay. Pwede natin gayahin si Brother Glenn, no? Marami siyang anak, kaya yung mga anak nila ay naturuan. At, and of course, we know, I remember in ERBC, the church that we were attending, there's a family. The families there are really practically bearing children every year. One family has 10 children. Average nila is about 5 or 6. They don't have very few yung only 2 children. So just like what Brother Glenn has said, it's biological multiplication of small Christians that you can teach. Brother Aika, yes, Sister Mike, please.
Siguro dadagdagan ko lang ng konti yung sinabi ni Glenn. I wish din na sana ang mga Kristiyano ay hindi mapagaya dun sa karamihan na parang lahat ng responsibilidad ay ipinapasa na sa gobyerno. So talagang dapat akuin natin. So for example, it's good that the government has taken steps para itaas yung literacy rate, no? But kung sa Christian family natuturoan natin ng maayos, it's not just about reading and no? And maganda yung sinabi mo, pag ang anak mo magaling magbasa, pero hindi niya nababasa ang Bible, malaki ang problema natin bilang. So yun. Alala ko nung unang panahon, hilig kasi ako sa British, yung noon pa, no? Parang seryoso masyado sila dahil sa Christian background nila, na inaangkin nila yung responsibilidad sa pagkain, pagpapakain ng pamilya, to the point naman napa-extreme na mamamatay na sila pero hindi sila hingi ng tulong. No, hindi naman ganun yung sinasabi ko. But ganun sila kaseryoso sa duty nila towards sarili and towards family. I'm not even saying na wag tayong humingi ng tulong sa labas, sa church or sa government. But dapat very responsible tayo, and especially so as meron tayong Diyos na nagpo-provide ng lahat ng natin. So the balance, that God can also use your friends, your neighbors, your church mates, and even the government, even unbelievers, para i-bless niya tayo.
Thank you for the comment. Other comments? Things you'd like to share? Yes, Brother Ferdy, please.
Yung akin lang din gustong share. Actually, nauna lang ako ni Deacon Glenn. Yun lang din ang gusto kong medyo gustong i-emphasize bilang mga Kristiyano. Kung ano talaga yung pwede mo ring maiambag sa government. Kasi parang yung topic nyo, although yung isang part ng corruption, pero parang sa kabuuan nito ay yung sa kabutihan ng bansa. Minsan kasi nga, kahit tayo mga Kristiyano, anumang grupo natin, gusto ko nang gamitin kahit pa Reform, Baptist, ay minsan ay sumasala sa bagay na to. Minsan ay pag hindi natin gusto yung ating mga pinuno, parang wala na yung support natin. Ako, I'm very much involved sa politics. Almost 30 years na yata akong bumoboto, wala akong pinalampas mula sa barangay elections hanggang sa presidential. Nakita ko yung halaga nun, personally, yung pagboto, pagpili. Pero wala akong ipinanalong presidente, no? Pero ako ay masasabi ko na in good faith na sa isang banda ay nagsusupport ako sino man yung manalo. At kung ano yung siguro pwede mong maiambag kahit sa napakaliit na bagay. Especially siguro as Christian. So, yun lang siguro yung gusto kong i-share. Kaya medyo, napakilig ko rin sa politics, pero pag dating sa church, medyo hindi ako sang-ayon kapag halos tayo nagtatalo-talo, nagdidebate. So, medyo mabigat ang aking doon. Lang, thank you.
Thank you, Brother Ferdy. Last point or two? Yes, Brother Paul.
Maganda yung tanong, yung palagi kasi natitingnan yung government as the provider of many things. Education, hanap buhay. And I like that statement that it's to promote universal education but not to provide education for citizenry. Brother, meron lang I'd just like to make sense of what's going on in United States. Sorry for that example, but I think it relates perfectly to our situation sa Pilipinas. Yung recent Supreme Court decision ng United States to acquit Donald Trump for his actions related to interference in the elections of 2020. Ngayon, if you relate that, una kasi, it's quite unthinkable na si Donald Trump, who clearly is guilty of certain actions related to interfering in the election results, to many people's minds, it's a criminal act. Pero because it was done in an official capacity, he was acquitted, meaning he's immune from persecution for such an act because he was president at that time. So ngayon, pag mabalik tayo sa Pilipinas, and because our constitution is closely patterned after the US, it seems that if somebody pursues a case against the former president for anomalous transactions like Parmali, maring hindi rin mag-prosper for that same reasoning that it was done in his official capacity. Ngayon, that somehow reminds me of yung sinabi mo about the story of David. Because, again, balikan natin, we say that the law should be king and the king should not be Lord above the law. So David, even in his official capacity, wasn't immune to that criminal act, or he was made accountable for that. So just to make sense of it, para bang ano ba? If I actually don't have a question, but more of a how do we make sense of what's going in the US and what potentially could happen in the Philippines, the basis of biblical truths?
Okay, I'm not really a lawyer and I could not make a good balance of it. But all I could say about that the law should have a moral authority. In the case of David, there's really that moral authority that Nathan the prophet have exercised, that really showing the sin of adultery and murder that David has committed. And of course, he could not invoke that immunity, because he would say, oh, it was a war. Uriah was killed in a war. And that's why I just took Bathsheba after the husband died. Of course, behind that is the moral lamp of God that says really a sin. Of course, I could not make a moral judgment whether Donald Trump did something that is morally wrong but I think what the court did say was it's part of his immunity not to be charged. And of course, that could send really signal to our judicial system that they could invoke similar immunity argument for the Parmali case, that even being the architect of the Tokhang program, where there were thousands accordingly were summarily executed without justice. So I could not make really but I could just say is there could be this moral judgment that could be done, but not our laws are not necessarily morally attuned to it. We can find, say for example, there are this same-sex marriage that, although it's not yet a law in the United States, I don't know if here in the U.S. they're battling out for the SOGI bill, or maybe even later for the divorce law. Some of them could be not morally upright. So that's just my thought. I could not really make a very legal and distinguishing really moral culpability of Donald Trump. course, he invoked, he was saying by God's grace, he was saved from that bullet. I don't know if he's a changed man or what after that, but we know that it's just, and I don't know if he really is a follower of God, and I can say that, make that moral judgment. Okay, I think it's past the time, so we can close our lesson. Our great God and Father, we thank you for this lesson about the government that would be supporting progress towards prosperity of a nation or country. Even in the Philippines, we know that we yearn to have a very ideal government, but we know even globally, those progressive countries, those prosperous countries have been exhibiting governments which are not fully attuned to your moral standards. And we know that in this side of heaven, we can never have that perfect government. And we just continuously pray, dear Father, that even in our own families, even in our own church, we would be that believer who would be following your commandments, who would be very much attuned to your commandments, that righteousness, holiness, and uprightness would be a standard that we'll be following in our families. And so, dear Father, we commit to you our young children, those children that we believe will be inheriting our country to be the morally upright citizens who would be providing for the possible progress, the progress that we yearn at this point in time in our history. We know, dear Father, that your timing is always perfect. And so even though we live in this kind of country, as defective as it may be, we continuously pray that we will be fervent in our prayers, devoted to your holiness and righteousness, in constantly uplifting our government in prayer. Salamat po, Panginoong Diyos, sa leksyon pong ito, maging sa umaga po ng pagsamba at pag-aaral. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.